Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on Adam Jezewski. He is bringing a very unique perspective. This is a gentleman who is in the hockey life from a coaching standpoint. He's going through this with his children, trying his best, taking a lot from many various sources, people, etc., and creating an unbelievable environment for his kids. So really excited to share what a volunteer parent can do. And I feel like there's a lot of coaches out there that give a lot of crap to parent coaches, but I think there's a ton of great ones out there. And just highlighting Adam in particular is amazing. He's done a phenomenal job, and there's so many quality volunteers out there in this sport. I can't wait to share this positive episode with you. So without further ado, let's get into it. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, I'm excited to bring on one of our Hockey IQ newsletter fanatics and unbelievable youth coach, Adam Jezewski. Got it. All right. So let's get into it. So you're from Canada, outside the Toronto area. Give us a background of how you've got to where you are, and then what level you're coaching, and then I'll ask some questions from there.
Cool. Okay. So as I said to you in our little preamble, I look up so much to guys like John Lutkemeyer you have on before, an inspired hockey parent who is a relentless learner. So my background is I grew up in the Ottawa Valley, farm town called Elmont. Played tons of sports like most kids in that environment, and wasn't great at anything, but it was so small I got to play everything because there was about 20 kids for each birth year. So there wasn't like, a big city now where there's hundreds of kids at each birth year vying for spots on rep teams. It was like there's two teams, one and a two team, and everyone got to play, and you got to play every sport. So played lots of sports growing up. Rep hockey was a passion, until I was in my late teens. I played a couple of years of low-level junior in the area. Played high school football and then university football up here, and ran track. And so I just loved competing. I was never great at anything, but I just enjoyed the camaraderie and playing. And then that got put on hold as I finished school and started living. And then I started having kids. I ended up having three sons. And my oldest now 14. I got a 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and a 10-year-old. And as soon as the 14-year-old turned 7, he wanted to play hockey. So got involved as a parent coach with his youth hockey team. And I've just been following him, really. So now, 7 years later, I've coached in the Oakville Rangers hockey organization. And I think the Oakville Rangers Hockey Club is the largest minor hockey organization in Canada by enrollment. At least I always see that in the marketing material. So we must be up there. And I coach a U15 AA team or tier 2 team. And I'm an assistant coach of my younger guys, U13 AA team as well. And then I'm a fanatical fan and cheerleader on my U11 sons team. So living my dream, Greg. Honestly, I try to spend the day making enough to pay the bills, pay for hockey, and then the evenings chasing these guys around and being involved.
Sounds like a lot of fun. And I know that you've got a great outlook on life. And if people Google your name, they'll see a article that we'll kind of reference. I think he has a lot of good pieces from you being November's Coach of the Month. And I just want to read a quick portion here and stick with me because my brain moves a lot faster than my mouth does. So I'll screw up at some point here. But from a parent, as told by his nomination, we feel we have the best coach possible for our boys this season. Never have I met a more positive person or one that has given so much to a group of boys. He cares so much for our boys and worked extremely hard to help each player reach their full potential. His primary objective is to develop the boys to be good citizens, healthy and strong athletes, and talented hockey players, and in that order of priority. His coaching program includes elements for each of these areas. And then they dive more into specifics, but I'm curious how you came to the realization or the reasoning, maybe why it was so important for you to talk about being good citizens first and foremost, and really develop healthy and strong athletes second.
It's interesting. From the time I first got involved with that U8 house league team 7 years ago, I noticed that I noticed two things. There was this sort of conflicting dynamic in these hockey rinks. On the one hand, it was beautiful. Like you had all these kids and families piling into rinks and having a blast playing this game we love. And on the other hand, a lot of negativity, like a lot of grown-ups behaving not great. I shouldn't say a lot, but a few who seem to have a significant presence, yelling and banging on glass and talking down to the officials and whatnot. And it struck me, I grew up in an environment of sort of the hard ass coach, guys who tried to motivate with negativity. And I'm the kind of person I wake up each day, and it'll sound silly, but like grateful. I'm grateful that I have 3 sons and a happy marriage and a job I like and all those things. But then I get to the hockey rink and it's literally the best 2 hours of the day. And I just felt like reading, last time you and I spoke, I mentioned I love to read about coaches and leaders that I admire. And you go from, John Wooden to Urban Meyer to John Gordon. I'm a big fan of his books about being a teammate and a citizen. And I just thought, you know what, there's so much material available to teach kids technical hockey skills, which I really enjoy. And I try hard to learn and do a good job of that. But I think where maybe I saw things falling short was on, are we spending enough time using this as an opportunity to just teach these guys to be good guys, to be the kind of guys that hold doors for old ladies, without being told to, and to say please and thank you, and to treat officials with respect, and treat each other with respect. And so it kind of gathered steam, and I coached with another guy named Greg Newton for a few years. His son and my son are buddies. They played together, and we both felt the same. So we just started becoming an approach we took with everybody. And then, that a parent on the team that you just read from there obviously did something very kind for me. And it's funny because that team had a very deep losing record, but the kids, I think, had a blast. And, we all learned together, and we focused on doing as many community service initiatives as we could that season. And those kind of things, I think, weighed just as much in those kids' memories and their experience as, what happened against the town, next door on a Tuesday night. Like wasn't nearly as memorable as some of the community, enhancement initiatives. That's what we called it. We tried to get every boy to do one, and it became this awesome thing that we looked forward to. So I don't know, just a snowball that got going, and it became just as enjoyable a part of this whole experience for me as the hockey part. And other people kind of embraced it too, which made it easy to keep going.
I'm a big fan of the off-ice component. In my experience, and many coaches I've talked to, the faster people mature and more worldly they are, and the better citizens, and how quickly that happens, for whatever reason, seems to be the exact same level of ability for them to improve off the ice. So I'm always fascinated by coaches that focus on that off-ice portion, because unbeknownst to a lot of them, even if they don't understand maybe the game as deep as a lot of coaches,
they're probably out coaching those guys that have been around the rink or gals that have been around the rink for a long time coaching, just by focusing on these things. So I love that a lot. But further in this article, I think we're also talking about on ice stuff that I think super, super valuable and not enough coaches do. You actually share your practice plans in advance. And not only do that, you actually have videos that help prime these players to understand what you're looking for within the practice and within the details of the drills. I'm curious how that came about and, why that's so important to you.
You know what? That came about just from listening to podcasts like yours and getting ideas like from guys like you and listening to like Daryl Belfry and Bob Mancini. Just hearing over and over again, like no matter how little you're talking on the ice with kids taking a knee, you can do it less. And so the practice plans in advance. Actually, one of the boys' fathers suggested it. He said, he'd coached for a number of years. He said, you might want to send out the plans in advance. And I bet a bunch of kids read them. And I thought, well, that would probably save me a few minutes on the ice, just like to do whatever it is we're working on. And it was amazing. Like I circulated it and, I could tell they're probably of 17 guys, probably 12 or 13. Their parents would take the time to print it off and give it to them in the car. But it made a difference because the first 4 or 5 guys in line, they knew what we were doing. And I wouldn't say we had 100% hit rate on it. I mean, if I had a busy day, sometimes I wouldn't get it out. But when I got it out in advance, first the kids felt kind of pro, like to be looking at a practice plan before. And then the guys that embraced it, they really embraced it. They'd show up at practice and have questions beforehand. Why are we doing this? And what is this? How does this apply to a game? And then I'd have to prepare more and have answers to those kinds of questions. And it became just a lot more dialogue about thinking about the game and why we're working on things we are in practice. So that snowballed and it became a no-brainer. And then the video stuff was awesome because I knew other coaches who were amazing at getting a video of a game and then cutting, like slicing it and dicing it and breaking all this stuff. That's not me. Unfortunately, I had a parent who had this shaky hand, camcorder, took these kind of rough videos, but they were good enough that if I went through it and found 3 or 4, great plays that a boy made, which were exactly what we worked on. And then a couple of plays where they weren't bad plays, but there were things where I would stop and say, what else could you have done here? This is what you did. Like, what else could you have done? And it was unbelievable. These kids were 12 years old and they loved that dialogue. They loved being asked. They watching the video. First, their parents were chuffed, right? Their parents got to say, "Oh yeah, cool! Look at that play you made," and we know exactly where it was in the video in terms of the time. And your coach noticed that, and then they would show up at the meetings, and sometimes they would say, "No, here's why I did that. I think it was the right play." And we just got into these great conversations, and so those two things just fed together. And over the course of the year, I really felt like it didn't just help the guys get better, but it helped them enjoy the game more because they understood it more. So it's like in math class. If you understand the calculus better, it makes more sense and you enjoy it more. I thought it was the same kind of impact. So they just kind of snowballed.
I think that's fascinating. Because I've found that coaches who start acquiring all this knowledge, they start just kind of spewing it on the kids and they kind of pick it up, but it doesn't become personalized to like them and their skill set, or they become over relying on, oh, coach told me, so I do this every time. I really enjoyed how you said that you actually were just asking them questions. Like, I don't know how many players can think of answers. You don't even have to have I'm curious to see how many times you asked a question where you had an answer versus when you didn't have an answer. Because I think that's so important that you don't have to have all the answers. And I think it's almost better if you don't, because then you can just guide the players on their journey to figuring out solutions that work for them. Like sometimes you do need to prompt them and give them some ideas. I would say maybe 80, if not 90% of the things are super obvious when the kids just take a half second to think about it. Just like you said, you asking a question gives them that pause. That's my favorite way to coach is get them thinking, get them reflecting and finding solutions for their skill set. So I'm curious your thoughts.
100%. Another coach whose stuff, And you'll see I make constant references to other people because the reality is I have zero creativity. I'm just grabbing and stealing and trying to mold it into my style and approach. And sometimes I have to dumb it down for myself, like when I find something really technical from a high level coach. But I came across those USA coaching series last spring, or maybe a previous time, from Bill Beanie, and he showed a movie clip. He fumbled on the video, but he showed this movie clip of a scene from a jazz orchestra, and he's making the point that, like, look, these guys, if you just let them go, they all go and riff and find their own melody, and they're creative within whatever context you want them to be. But if you just give them space and let them figure things out, they will. And so I found that asking them the questions, I mean, not only did they often came up, even if I thought I had the right answer, what I learned over time was sometimes there is no right answer. There's two or three, things that they could have seen. I wasn't on the ice. I wasn't looking at it from their perspective, and they saw something really cool. And especially over time, I found the answers got more and more interesting. So it ended up being them guiding me versus vice versa. I ended up learning more from a source that I hadn't expected, and that was as a learning addict. It was awesome.
That's fascinating. I actually have a little bit of a rift with just letting the players go. I think they need some guidance and some sparks. They need that little spark plug. The motorcycle doesn't start without a little bit of a spark plug first. And you can ride it like a bike all you want and push it down a hill, but eventually for it to really go, you got to give it some sparks. I think that's what the questioning is for. And I think you hit on a very important part, is like, you can start to go places where you didn't plan to, but were probably extremely valuable. And before you know it, it's like it's a journey together with the player. It's like a co-learning environment, and it's awesome. And like, you can start to get in the minds of the players and understand, like, oh, there's some different types of processing of the plays by each different types of players. That's fascinating. I don't know about you, but I probably ask questions more often than most people would assume, of questions where I don't have the answer. I'm just looking to get in the mind and understand what the player's thinking, or just prompt them to do some reflection. I don't know. How many questions would you say? Like 50% of questions, 10, 90, where you don't really have an answer in mind, or you only have like a vague answer?
Honestly, Greg, I find over time the ratio gets more and more weighted to I don't have a definitive answer. And like, what I found is that a couple of years ago, starting that approach, I had an answer in my head. I'm not sure it was the right one, but I had decided what I thought was right. And I found where it gets more powerful is the more that I can just not do that, let them respond, and not only that, but try deliberately not to have the answer to some of these questions. So I'm finding, for me, no different than, again, talking to guys that I look up to as hockey coaching mentors. Try to ask the question with no expectation, no predetermined answer. Maybe some ideas as to where to guide them if they're looking for that, as you said, but more just genuinely looking for their perspective.
That's excellent. Really, really like that. Just talked about a lot, so we'll just keep moving here down the line, because there's so many good little tidbits I think that you do, and you probably don't even realize all of them. But I also really enjoyed in this article, they talked about how you give feedback. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves is when people give very canned jargon. We got to be harder on pucks. Like, what does that mean to players? Like, if you told me that as a player, I literally did not know what that meant. And your feedback is very specific. And they mentioned it's also very positive, to the point where it's very actionable for players. Like, they can palpably take it and go utilize it in a game. Is that something you consciously do, or is that something that just kind of comes from your personality or your background or whatever?
I think that the person who wrote that was probably being generous when they said I was, super specific. I hope I'm getting better at that over time, but definitely positive. That's very deliberate. I mean, I anyone who knows me, and some folks don't, it's probably too much, but I think that the positive leadership is a superpower. I mean, I've seen kids who, the number one challenge I find with kids in sports is their parents are putting pressure on them. They're putting pressure on themselves. They feel peer pressure. And I think when you can just help them relax and just let them know first how much you love watching them play. And when a guy comes off, I can't help myself. So I'm like, holy smokes, that was an awesome play. You know, or if a guy comes off and he's coughed up a puck, but before that, like he was trying to do something really cool that we just worked on. Like that's the part that we should see, right? I think that's the part that if we're trying to teach kids, teach kids and then get them to apply it in games, if they try to do what we were working on, but it happens not to work out because some good player on the other team is trying to stop them. I mean, it's not going to work all the time at any level. You emphasize what they tried to do. And all of a sudden, a guy whose shoulders are slumped over and his eyes are down, now he's pumped up because and he goes out on his next shift, like fired up instead of, coming off and hearing like, why'd you do that? That was terrible. You turned over the puck. Like, I don't know. I find that I have found, Greg, honestly, like that with all three of these age groups that, it can't be all the time. If a guy is not behaving well or needs to hear constructive criticism, you got to give it. But if most of what they hear from a coach is positive, positive feedback, I just think guys thrive on that, guys and gals. The only thing I'd say I got to be cautious on it is my middle son. He's a very perceptive guy. So he's the point now. He'll get in the car and he'll say, I don't think I played very well. And I'll say, I thought you played great. He's like, you always say that. Like, so I've lost credibility with him. Too much positivity. But
sound like Ted Lasso out there.
What's that?
It's sounding like Ted Lasso. I'm not sure if you've seen that show.
Yeah.
It seems like it's making the rounds, especially in the coaching community.
Oh yeah,
being ultra positive.
I love that. Right. So, yeah.
I had a coach mentor and his sons after a while, and they told him, like, hey, Dad, not every moment is a teachable moment. You could just be dad for a minute. That'd be cool. Which I thought was humorous. But to your first point there, about like screaming at the kids or being positive, what I think that not enough people understand that what they do either creates permission or pressure. Like that's something I'm very cognizant of when I'm going about things. Is like, if I'm letting something slide, okay, maybe I'm giving permission to do something, or I'm being positive, like, oh, great try there. It may didn't work out. Okay, I'm giving permission to try something versus, hey, you need to go glassing out, never go through the middle, or why did you make this decision and it got picked off? Whatever it is, like, especially with kids that are creative out there and they can do stuff, like you don't want to limit them. So it's like creating that pressure versus permission. So I think that's super valuable. And I love the positivity. You definitely need to be more positive than negative. Especially at the younger ages. So I'm a huge fan of that. And I think one thing that you're really great is creating moments for kids as well, whether that being allowed to give the pregame talks or just like doing the final sweep in the dressing room to leave it better than what they found it. So I'm curious. I have an idea where you're going with this, but I'm curious, like within sport, like making it very memorable, a very positive experience.
Oh man, I mean, you nailed it. I find it's like attitude. You think of all the things that when you get out of the car with your hockey bag headed to the rink that you can control. I mean, you can control your facial expression, your body language, how you're walking in, the vibe you're giving your teammates, the way you communicate with people. You control all those things. I mean, no matter what your day was like, you got a chance to wipe it fresh. And then I found early in that season, so I started giving guys. So like one of my hockey heroes is Adam Graves. He's my wife plays with his wife on a women's league team in Oakville, and so I get to hang out with them socially sometimes at their team events. Like I'm a hanger on in this group. And here's a guy who's as great a hockey player as he was, even better person, like phenomenal person. So he gave one of my boys a little banner with his number from his retirement night. And I used that. I gave that to a boy each week as the dressing room captain. And the responsibility as the dressing room captain that night was to give the pregame speech. And these kids would prepare. Like they'd show up. I had stuff, Greg, like these guys, some of these guys gave moving pregame speeches where it was like, man, that was heavy and awesome. And then their other responsibility was to be the last guy to the room and make sure that every piece of tape was picked up. Like we had janitors coming. We'd get diced on the ice some night, but the janitor up from, up in Orangeville would come and say, man, like you guys, that's the cleanest I've ever seen the room afterwards. And I thought, you know what, we can walk out of here proud about something. And I wasn't, not to belittle it. Like, yeah, we didn't have a great game, but you know what? You had your chins high. No one cleans up after you guys. You took care of the room afterwards.
You win no matter what.
100%, man. And some people think that's really cheesy, and I think it's the most important thing. I honestly do. As far as making solid young men, like that's more important than having a good wrist shot, I think. And I think the other part will come as a result of trying to be a good guy. You'll get good in everything. So but I tell you, the pregame speeches, like I heard some awesome stuff, some hilarious stuff and some awesome stuff. And initially I had some parents approach me and say, hey, like my son, he can't go tonight. He's so nervous. So can he go in a couple of months? And I'd say no, because in a couple of months, you're going to come and have the same request. He's never going to go. This couldn't be a more loving, safe environment. So he's going to go up there. I'll stand beside him. I'll help him through it. Every guy there is scared and anxious about standing in front of a room and talking, and he's going to be fine. And he was. And that you talk about permission. Other kids gave him permission and made him feel, emotionally safe. Then they're all up there. Now they all want to do it. And so that was a win, right? Even if you didn't win games, that was a win with this group.
I love it. It's striving for excellence in everything, whether it
Totally.
be emotionally, athletically, you name it, in any shape or form. They're always striving for excellence. So I love that type of thing. The University of Akron, we do something similar with our Life U program and assigning jobs for each game, whether it be like finding a scorekeeper or communicating with the person who's doing the anthem, just like these little things that just truly add up and add fulfillment, excellence. Like I'm more proud of my student Toastmasters than I am of my actual college degree. One was a lot more expensive than the other, but one gave me the confidence to take on the world.
Right. Totally. That's awesome.
So something that I'm passionate about, I've had some discussions with players, but fortunately, Scotty Bowman, you and I are all on the same page. Giving players a chance to play different positions, so valuable. Obviously, the NHL, Scotty Bowman didn't exactly do it in games too much, but I know coming up the ranks and definitely in practice, every single practice, every player played every position. Curious where that came from you. I've been doing it just because I think it's so valuable to have different perspectives all over the game. And then I was listening to Scotty Bowman, I think it was like 6 months ago, and he was talking about how that was something he used to do consistently. And probably made sense, why Fedorov was able to play defense so easy later in his career.
Honestly, I spent so much time with, especially with my oldest guy when he was younger coming up. I would hear so many people say, my 10-year-old's a left winger. And I'm like, how can you be sure? That seems really locked in pretty early. And then my youngest guy started playing with a guy named PJ Yedden. He played at Colgate years ago. So he was like, he's in our community, there's a legit hockey guy, right? He's played high level. And parents would ask him, hey, what position will my son play? Like, I think he's a center, right? Like most teams will have 15 aspiring centermen, right? And a goalie. And so PJ had a great way to describe it that I just embraced it. He said, every kid's going to play WCS. Oh yeah. Well, what does that mean? What coach says, and he would just move guys around, and he would move guys around during games sometimes. And I'm watching it going, that feels right. So sometimes I would put a guy who's normally a right winger, throw him out at left D, and just take, you're going to be great. Like you're going to figure this out. Don't worry. Some, for sure in practice, try to move guys around, and guys would be, they're so excited for that. Because again, I like the way you describe it. It's giving someone permission, not necessarily formally, saying the word permission, but it's like saying it's okay. You got a green light here to just do some learning and figure it, and talk to your partner. He'll have some tips for you. Talk to the guy who's traded positions with you. He'll have some tips for you. We can sit down and whiteboard some stuff here. But like the stakes are just so low in minor hockey. They're like, we play in this tier 2, Pee Wee league, and some folks, you can tell by facial expressions, some parents, that this is like life or death. It's a game in November. You think these stakes are so low, we should treat them as low. I mean, we want them to do their best and be their best selves and play to their potential for sure. But if we win that game or, that night or not, because Johnny didn't play left D, I mean, so I think kids learn the game more. They appreciate their teammates more. They have more fun, and it feels less pressurized when you do stuff like that. That's just one thing you can do to achieve those things, I think.
Yeah, it's playing the long game, which I really like. And some kids will go kicking and screaming back to play defense. I remember 2 years ago, I had a player played center his entire life.
Right.
And I'm like, you need to learn how to play defense, okay? It's going to make everything in your position and your actual game. So I put him back there for 2-3 games. And yeah, I did all right, but I kept coming off like shaking his head, like, what is going on or what am I doing? And then the following season, he ended up thanking me just randomly. And I was like, man, took a long time for him to fully realize that it was very helpful for him in his development, but he ended up seeing the positivity and figured it out and saw it. So it was quite funny for him to say that, it's good. I'm like, oh, now you say, and, make it fun and memorable, but it's just incredible how you play the long game, how much more effective your decision-making and coaching truly becomes.
It takes guts, right? Like, because it's that first while when the child is pushing back, and you can bet that his parent probably isn't thrilled. Like some of the parents would think, well, why are you putting him there? They get really, but then to have them all see the light at the end, the long game, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like that's the mismatch for most people, is especially the coaches that are the best. They have this long-term vision for these players. And same with a lot of these talent evaluators and developers. And then you have these players and parents that can't really see that, or they're not quite there. They see kind of the then and the now, which is why I think coaching, doesn't matter, any part of your life, right, is super important, because it's very hard for you to see past tomorrow. Totally. Or past today even. It's just incredible, the mismatch in timing and how that, I feel like, creates 90% of the problems out there, the perceived problems that really aren't.
I think you're right. Yeah.
So I'm curious. So we've talked a lot about that, all of the stuff that's in the article. Is there something beyond that, or something else that you feel like you do that's super important and valuable, or things that you've learned over the years that have just worked so well, and that you wish that you would have known earlier, or other people should understand?
Again, it's just stuff that I've seen other guys that I admire do. I mean, two things. One is, building more and more small area games, or games with constraints, or however someone wants to describe it. Trying to teach through competitive situations. I think obviously this is, nothing unique about this, but it amazes me. Like when I was playing competitive hockey 30 years ago, that game versus the game today, that's driven so much by the recognition that this is really about habits and skills and being able to play in small spaces. I mean, it's incredible. And I go back to Bill Beanie. I watched one webinar he put on where the interviewer asked him, well, what percentage of your practice at Middlebury was small area games? He said, 98, like 98%. And I thought, wow. Because I find even now, like in minor hockey, there's a recognition, you should do a couple of those here and there for fun. But otherwise, full ice, tons of full ice flow drills. And there's still a huge, I think, belief that that's still the way. And I think the right answer is probably somewhere in the middle, but the guy who coaches the team ahead of me at our U15 age group, like he's all in on small area games. And I think he takes some criticism and flack for it, but I just his commitment to it, his belief in it is just too strong. So I really follow guys like him and PJ. And then again, when I was listening to you and Lutkemeyer talking about philosophy, like it just keeps reinforcing and reinforcing, the cross ice small games and situational small games. So that's one thing that I think every parent coach should be trying to learn about and embrace. I try to learn every day more about the philosophy. And then second is like mental health. I had a guy last year. So this past season, the biggest impact we had in the COVID season, like everybody, it was so hard. And I think up here, we didn't open up as quickly as you guys did. I spent like most of the season with 10 player cohorts. So it'd be me alone on the ice a lot of the time with 10 guys. And then for the first 45 minutes, the another 45 minutes, 10 new guys would show up. Those guys would leave and we'd be on. We didn't play a single game against like another opponent. So there were kids who were struggling like in all parts of their life, but in this small part of their life, like they really lost something last year. Felt like they lost something. So what I'm going to do this year, because of our experience last year, I had a guy named Kyle Morrison, he's a local coach, and he actually has a blog or a website. I'm not a tech guy, so I'm not even sure of the terminology, but it's all between the ears, helping kids with body language and building confidence and, positive self-talk. And again, for some people, it seems really touchy-feely, but he did about 10 presentations to our team throughout the year. And I think it really helped. Like he talked about how, great athletes struggle with confidence, how Venus Williams has to give herself positive self-talk when things aren't going well, so she doesn't just go off the rails, completely and lose her focus. And he had a wonderful way of delivering it. So I just think it's a really untapped source of development for young people in all parts of life. And I think we can just use hockey as a forum, to use it, but just helping kids develop mental strength, like all elements of mental strength. And those two things they kind of kept us afloat last year. They made it so that I think most kids in the group would look back and say, you know what, we didn't get to go to tournaments or play games, those things, but it was actually a pretty fun year. Lots of competition and learned a lot of cool stuff about what's going on inside my head,
Yeah, I love both of those. I personally have a 2-page booklet that I have on self-defeating behaviors.
Ooh, cool.
I'm not confident enough to put that out into public quite yet, but I love using it and discussing those types of things.
So what do you do with it? If you don't mind me asking, do you share it with your players?
Yeah. So with our Life U sessions, I did that 2 years ago. So you utilized it then, and it was really nice and good. And you can see people really attached to it, or like finding examples that, like anything. I like specific feedback. I get really annoyed when people are very fluffy and pie in the sky type stuff. As you've probably noticed if you've listened to the podcast a few times by now. I definitely press into the weeds and the details. I think that's where the juicy goodness really is. So we'll talk about that. And again, it's the same thing. It's like you set up an environment, you give some prompts, and then you're just asking questions, and let the people figure it out for themselves. Who do you talk to more, and who do you believe the most? Positive self-talk, you talk to yourself the most. Self-defeating behaviors and understanding what your behaviors are. I mean, like, there's no one you spend more time with than yourself. So I'm huge. I'm big into that. I mean, I've got a book literally called Managing Ourselves that I think is super powerful. And it's the book itself is really dense. It's by Ari Weinswag from Zingerman's Deli up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's got a bunch of stuff. Actually, the most impactful book I've ever done is for Zingerman's Deli. He has a guide to giving great service. Zingerman's guide to giving, I think it's either good or great service, and it's probably my favorite book. It's actually a really easy read
and you can share it with any age group, and it'll be pretty effective.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, I can't say I read too many books. I read a lot, but not so much into books. And I'm one of those people who tries to get through as many as possible. Like if I'm not connecting the first 5 pages, probably not going to connect in the next 50. On to the next one, and really power through a lot of stuff like that. So that's what I personally like to do. I'm curious, as someone who's passionate about this, where do you go to find your inspiration, your knowledge? Obviously, you've got a great big curiosity, but just like ways that you find it, or ways that people can find good information out there. Because I feel like there's a ton of it out there and there's a ton of noise, but there is a scarce amount of true quality information that you can take and transfer.
It's a fair point. Like you're right. It's a fire hose, right? What's available now. So as you know, the way we met was mother of one of my players. I actually enjoy Hockey Arsenal newsletters so much that I would send it out sometimes before practices to guys to review it and encourage guys to sign up. So obviously I'm a big fan of your stuff. I think when we were speaking before, I said Jack Han. I love the detail he goes into. So his ebooks and his and his periodic stuff that he sends out. Love all that stuff. Few other guys like that, like you. Maybe even for a different reason. Like you're more at the elite level than I am. For me, I find the specificity. It's actually valuable because when there's missing pieces, like I'm not sure how to close those pieces. So when I see guys who write really detailed analyses of a play or a concept, it just helps me internalize it. So I've got a few sources like those that I keep coming back to. I subscribe to and read them everything something comes out. I read it and I share it. And then I love books. Like I read everything about John Wooden that I can find, Urban Meyer that I can find. John Gordon's a guy, like the book, The Hard Hat, the book you mentioned about how to give good service. Like for me, it's The Hard Hat. I actually give a copy of The Hard Hat to each of the players on my team for the past 2 years. And I'll probably do that as long as I'm coaching. It just resonates, like his recommendations for how to be a great teammate based on this Cornell lacrosse player. It just hits home. And then the last one that I've done a couple of reads on is the James Kerr book about the All Blacks, where I found Sweep the Shed. Like it's just the humility to have an 87% winning percentage, the most successful elite sports team of all time. And to be that humble, to be both those things at once is just amazing to me. So tons of books and a few sites. And then I will, whenever I run across someone local, we got a whole bunch of great local coaches. I'll grab these guys for a coffee anytime I can and just pepper them, for the cost of a couple of Starbucks. I get to pepper, like in our organization, we got Patrick O'Sullivan and Justin Pereira and PJ Yedden. We got a ton of guys that last year, Jamie Storr was the coach of my younger guys team. He played for the Kings and Team Canada, like just tremendous hockey backgrounds and really open sharing guys. Like they open books about their experiences and the kind of stuff that they use as resources, those kinds of things. So honestly, I'm just a big borrow and steal person. I'll probably like, a guy like Storr will forget more in the next 2 weeks than I'll ever know, but I'll just grab as much as I can from all those sources.
That's awesome. And I would love to give a shout out to one of the parents on your team, Linda, for even connecting us in the first place. She reached out and was saying how you had passed along some of our stuff from Hockey's Arsenal, the Hockey IQ newsletter. And I know we ended up connecting and finding out a lot more about you. And I think you just have so much great stuff to share. Like this is not a sport that is limited to just a few people. It can go much further, and it should, than just a few people. I think there's so many good lessons that you just talked about that anyone can give. Doesn't matter if you're a brand new coach or you're someone coming off the NHL and want to give back. Like all of these things are worthwhile on so many levels, especially outside of
the playing surface.
Totally. And I think that, I think I've heard you say it before, and others as well, to have that second string mentality, or the rookie mentality, and just always, the hunger to learn more, to be better. And if the kids can feed off that, if that's what you can give kids, huge win.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down. I really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. I'm excited. You're going to have to keep us up to date on how your team goes, and just, how much fun you guys are having, because that's what's really important about this. I mean, think about all the bonds you're making with your own kids and all of these teammates.
Totally, man. I'm humbled, Greg. I really appreciate you taking this, a second time to chat with me, and I'll look forward to the next time. Hope you come to Toronto, look me up, come on out and grab one of those Starbucks.
The border is opening up soon. I'm already talking about how I got to get back up to Toronto. It was one of my favorite vacations. So you don't have to ask me twice.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks a million. Take care, Greg. Cheers.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. So before we let you go, though, we'd like to remind you to please like our podcast, subscribe to it, give us a follow, and share this with all the hockey people in your life. We really appreciate growing this community, this podcast. Remember, we also have a newsletter, the Hockey IQ newsletter as well. Really excited to continue to grow this. So please help us grow this further by liking, subscribing, following, and sharing with everyone. So appreciate you all. Take care.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.